Hey everyone, before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to remind you that we have a ton of extra content over on our Patreon. We do movie watch parties, special Patreon bonus episodes, and all other sorts of wacky stuff that you can access easily if you head on over to patreon.com/filmwhiskey. On today's episode, we will be doing our very first interview with a real live actor.
Yeah, and not only any actor, Brad, but Graham McTavish, a beloved character actor who has a new line out called McTavish Spirits, will also be trying that right now and telling you what we think of this 7-year bottled and bond bourbon.
This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome into the Film and Whiskey Podcast. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we're coming at you with a very special bonus episode.
Bonus episode!
A couple weeks ago, we were contacted by my friend Connor from over at the Bourbon with Friends podcast. And he says, we've been working on a secret project. It's a celebrity whiskey. And I can tell you more about it if you sign an NDA. And I said, I'm sorry, what now?
And then, Bob, was this your first NDA?
In the whiskey world, it was, yeah.
Oh, you signed them outside the whiskey world.
I have, yeah. But I can't disclose. No, that's what it's for, man. Come on.
Can you talk about like the industry or like I want to hear something about it.
No, it was just for work. Like it wasn't anything, exciting.
Dang it, Bob. I'm trying to get you sued. Work with me here.
I know, right? Well, maybe I should divulge some more industry secrets about bourbon and we'll get ourselves there, Brad. But anyway,
good.
All this to say, signed an NDA, learned about this project that our friends over there at Bourbon with Friends had been working on with the actor Graham McTavish. Now, you may know Graham McTavish if you have watched the show Outlander, or if you have watched the show Preacher, or if you watched the Hobbit films. This guy has been in so many things. I called my dad the other day and I was like, hey, did you watch Outlander? He was like, yeah. And I told him about interviewing Graham McTavish. And he's like, this guy's big time, man. What'd you guys do to get this? So first thing I have to say is thank you so much to Bourbon with Friends for kind of setting this all up for us. But what they did was they and Graham basically launched this new brand called McTavish Spirits that Graham is very passionate about. And they've just come out with their first release under the McTavish Spirits line. It is a 7-year bottled and bond bourbon that they handpicked. They sent us samples of it, and they also set up an interview with Graham. And you will hear that interview at the back half of this episode. But Brad, I have been rambling for far too long, and I want to know what your thoughts are before we dive into this whiskey.
Well, I think it's kind of ridiculous that you didn't mention probably one of his most famous shows, the wildly popular Netflix The Witcher.
The Witcher. The man fought Henry Cavill, okay?
That's what I'm saying. The man who reloads his fists like they're guns.
Oh, man. I really can't wait for you guys to hear this interview with Graham. Brad was unable to join us for that interview, so you will hear me ramble on even longer in the back half of this episode. So let's get as much Brad in here as we can while we've got him. Brad, we've got this whiskey in front of us. I know that you have not tried it yet. I had a chance to sample it when I was talking with Graham. I want to hear your initial impressions as we're just getting into the nose here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have only smelt it thus far, and this is a really beautiful whiskey, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I feel like 6 to 9 years is such an incredible range for bourbon because you have all of the depth and flavor that you need from the barrel, and it's not overly oaked.
Yep.
Right? Like, in general, for people who are new to whiskey, a lot of the flavor, pretty much all of the flavor of whiskey comes from the process of the whiskey interacting with the chemicals of the wood itself. And when you make bourbon, it has to be in new oak barrels. And because of that, if you leave it in for too long, it gets really oaky. And I think that what I'm smelling here from our boy Graham McTavish smells like it's the perfect age statement.
Yeah, it's 7 years old. The mash bill is 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. So there's no wheat in this. And I will say on the nose, I don't know that you could trick me into thinking this was a wheated bourbon, but it has the sort of gentleness on the nose that I've come to associate with wheated bourbon. By that, I don't mean that it is lacking in aroma at all. But with wheated bourbon, Brad, you and I kind of get this effervescence sometimes that reminds us of drinking like a Coca-Cola. We usually get cherry, so I think a lot of times we talk about cherry Coke when we're nosing these. I don't know that I quite get cherry, but I get the sort of gentle brightness that I normally get on a wheated bourbon. And this is high rye. And the rye is not smacking you in the face. It has a little bit of like, I don't know, citrusy fruit character to me, but it's not aggressive at all. I'm so impressed with the kind of really nice, delicate floral notes that the oak is bringing out here. I would never have pegged this as being a high rye bourbon.
Yeah, I think it gets a little bit minty for me, and that's like the little hint that it's rye. But usually with something 20% or higher on rye, you're getting some of those specifically rye notes. Here, it just gets a little bit minty. I think that it has like a caramel drizzle nose that you just get a hint of caramel. And yeah, it's floral, it's bright. There's almost like a marmalade jam type of smell to it. I'm a big fan, Bob, and I can't wait to drink it.
Well, let's get into it, man. Let's take a sip.
Oh, yeah, dude. That is like vanilla and butterscotch, and then it moves into a little bit of a black pepper. The rye comes through just a little bit at the end. I'd almost call it more of a finish. But man, there is complexity here. The oakiness holds off for long enough to allow you to experience the complexity. And then it hits you right at the end with those rye spices, with a little bit of that pepperiness. Bob, this is a delicious whiskey.
So you guys will hear this in my interview with Graham here in a couple minutes, but I kind of asked him to answer the obvious question, which is, why is a Scotsman picking bourbon? Why are you not releasing a Scotch, right? And he talked about his introduction to bourbon about 20 years ago, and that the second he took a sip, he realized he preferred bourbon to Scotch, and it's because of the sweetness of bourbon. And as soon as I heard him say that, I was like,
you guys are like best friends.
I'm in good hands now. And I hadn't tried the product yet. It has that sort of not quite syrupy sweetness, but vanilla's a good note on this, Brad. I know vanilla's an obvious one for bourbon, but there's a creaminess to this that you don't normally get, especially on high rye bourbons. Those ones tend to be not necessarily harsh, but I think a word that I use a lot is prickly. Like the rye definitely makes itself known. And here it's almost like a vanilla custard or something that I'm getting. And it's underscored by that mintiness that you were talking about, but it hangs out in that almost wheated bourbon like playing field that I love so much. It is an incredibly easy sipper at 100 proof. And I think that what I'm most impressed about is like how cohesive this whole thing is. You know what I mean? Like there's not a ton of tasting notes that are popping out to me throughout the experience, because it just tastes like from nose to taste to finish, it's all of a piece.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. This is like a decently complex, beautiful, sweet experience with just enough spiciness to make you go, man, I want to experience more of this. And if they're picking barrels and they're always this good, Bob, the McTavish line is going to be incredible for years to come.
All right, Brad, you know what? Let's put our money where our mouth is here. Sometimes we get sent samples of stuff and we're like, yeah, it's good. But especially on bonus episodes, we don't usually put it through our rigorous scoring technique. I think we should score this one because I like this enough that I'm not only going to recommend it, but I want you to hear the score that I would give this. I think I would give well, let me pull up a calculator.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Bob, I think that I would say the nose is beautiful, but doesn't fully represent what you're about to get into. I'd probably give it like a 7.5 out of 10 on the nose. Where are you at?
I'm going to give it an 8 on the nose. I'm with you. I think that of the three big things that we're going to score here, nose, taste, finish, the nose is the one that it hints at like, oh, this is going to be nice. It's kind of playfully sweet. There's not a ton going on complexity-wise. And I wasn't prepared for how decadent and delicious it was going to be on the palate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, I'll go to the palate next. I'll give it an 8.5 there, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just a really, really nice, easy to drink bourbon that whether you're new to the world of bourbon or you are an accomplished drinker, like you and I are, Bob, this has a lot to offer, man.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 9 on the taste. I'm also going to give it a 9 on the finish. I will say up front, this is right up my alley. Like, this whiskey could have been branded Graham McTavish's Bob Book whiskey, and I would have signed off on it. I would have bought every bottle, and I would have been happy about it. But from the taste to the finish, it is just exactly what I want out of 100 proof whiskey. And that means that on balance, Brad, I think that I'm going to give it, I'll give it an 8.5 on balance. I kind of want to give it a 9 there too, but the nose is just a hair under the taste and finish for me. So I'll give it an 8.5 there.
Yeah, I'll give it an 8 out of 10 on balance. And I'm curious about value, Bob. How much is this going to be sold for?
So this is kind of a premium bottle. It looks like it's selling on the website for $75. Now, I will say, there's one run of this, and then it's going to be, it's batched, right? So it's not like you're going to have McTavish Spirits, this particular release, forever. Like, they're going to sell out of it, and then they're going to do the next release, to my knowledge. And I think $75 is right in that perfect price point where it's not quite as expensive as something like Bardstown Bourbon Company or Barrel, which we always endorse on here. But it's a rare whiskey that has a name attached to it that, like, if you have a fan of The Witcher or Outlander or The Hobbit in your life, this screams Christmas present, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And you also have not said the name of this whiskey, Bob. It's called the War Chief.
You know what? it's my nickname, and so I just gloss right past it.
Gotcha.
It's like, oh, of
Bob,
course, the War Chief.
The War Chief book. Like you're an 80s basketball superstar.
Like I'm like one of the guys in the original Predator that doesn't make it to the end. Like me and Jesse Ventura.
Oh, man.
All right, listen.
Incredible.
So I am going to give it an 8 out of 10 on value. I think it is like, if it didn't have Graham McTavish attached to it, I would still say this is like a $65 bottle of whiskey. The fact that it is in limited supply and you have the endorsement of Graham McTavish behind it, I think $75 is not at all overpriced for this.
Yeah, I think that's a decent value. I'm with you. I think this is about a $60 bottle of whiskey, but I'll give it a 7 out of 10 on value here. Bob, that is bringing me out to a 39 out of 50.
Brad, I'm at a 42.5 out of 50. This is well above that 40 mark where we start calling a whiskey great for me. Like, listen, man, we get a lot of stuff sent to us to try on bonus episodes. Mm-hmm. This is one of the best things I've been sent in like at least a year. It's really, really good.
No, 100%, man. This is a phenomenal whiskey that I honestly can't say you get many of these by famous people. We've tried a few, endorsed by famous folk brands that have not been great. Mm-hmm. And this is not one of them. This is absolutely amazing, Bob.
All right. Well, let's get to this interview with Graham McTavish. Brad, I'm so excited for you to hear what we talked about. He was really familiar with you, and he particularly said, I hate that guy and all his movie opinions. So,
jeez.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to it.
All right, everyone. I am joined by the man himself, Graham McTavish. Graham, thanks so much for joining us on Film and Whiskey today.
Absolute pleasure. Delighted to be here. Yeah.
Now, listen, I have a lot of questions for you, so I hope you're ready to get inundated here.
I'm ready with my answers. I am.
I don't know if we've ever had a guest who is so well-versed in both film and whiskey. You're the resident expert just by virtue of being here. You've already taken the crown.
Well... That's right. I just stormed the castle and I'm in occupation. Yes. No, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
I was reading an article today, kind of going over your filmography, and it went all the way back to, I guess, what we could call your big break, which was a play that you co-wrote, a two-hander, about Vincent van Gogh. And I really loved the article placed an emphasis on just how much promotion you had to do to kind of get your name out there with that play. And I have seen a pattern throughout your career that you are just such a generous guy with your time in terms of being willing to give interviews, being willing to go on podcasts. And there's a lot of actors that really value their personal time and don't like giving interviews. Where do you find the energy to be out here doing this so much?
Well, I mean, there's two parts to my answer, I would say. The first one is just, when it comes to projects that I've been in, like, films or TV, recently with anything that I've been in, when I was in Outlander, when I did The Hobbit, all of those things, you have a professional obligation to promote the things that you're in, and
sure,
that's part of your job. And I take that. I very much come from a generation who takes that seriously. That you have a professional obligation to people that are relying on you to fulfill a role, and also the people that are going to see those films or television or whatever it is, that you have an obligation to them. I feel a responsibility, particularly the kind of things that I've done recently, which all weirdly seem to be somehow connected with existing books. So
yeah, sure.
Outlander, The Hobbit, The Witcher, House of the Dragon, Preacher. Yeah, I mean, there's just been so many that have had this kind of literary background with an existing fan base. And when you have a huge fan base for things, you have an obligation to treat those people seriously and
absolutely
actually talk about it in a somewhat intelligible way. But then there's the stuff that, and not to say that I didn't believe in those projects, because I did, and I was very, very much enjoyed doing them. But then there are things that you have a real passionate involvement in, a personal passionate involvement in. So that would go back to the Van Gogh show, or Van Gogh, as you say.
Thank you.
No, or Van Gogh, Van Gogh, as they say in Holland.
There it is.
So going right back to that, I produced that. I co-wrote it with my friend Nick Pace, and we toured that all over the world. Actually, when I did Clanlands with Sam. That was something I really, really, really believed in and really wanted to promote. Same with when I've done Men in Kilts, I've really wanted to push myself into talking about them. And the same with this. These are things that it's not like I've done loads of this sort of stuff in my career. I work hard. When I'm doing the job that I'm doing, I take it seriously and I put everything into it. But then there are the things that have sort of dotted my career, which they've sort of sometimes come by accident. The Van Gogh show being a perfect example, actually. We were looking for a two-man show. We'd done Edward Albee's The Zoo Story. We'd done it at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It had gone well. We liked working with each other. And we were looking for another two-man show. We couldn't find one. We really tried hard. We couldn't find one. And it needed to be around an hour-ish long-ish, hour and a half. And we couldn't find one. And we bumped into a lady. My friend worked at the National Gallery in London. Nick worked there.
Okay.
And we bumped into a lady in Covent Garden Market. And she said, "Oh, where are you going?" And I, asking what we were doing. And I said, "Oh, we're trying to find a play." And she said, "Oh, well, I saw a play by a Dutch actor 10 years ago, which would have then been in the 70s. A one-man show about Vincent van Gogh and the letters that he wrote to his brother Theo. That was amazing." And this is the strange thing, and I think this has been a feature of many of the things that I would call forks in the road in my life. On any other day, I can assure you that Nick and I would have just gone to the pub and gone, "Oh, that's really interesting," and then just had 5 pints and forgotten all about it.
Sure.
Or resolved it, "Oh, yeah, we'll do something about that." But instead, we went straight to a bookshop. It was like I was sort of compelled. And I went straight to the bookshop and immediately found the book. It was like it was waiting. The Letters of Vincent van Gogh. And I picked it up off the bookshelf, bought it, took it home, read it from cover to cover, and immediately, because I knew only the basics about Van Gogh at that point, and I immediately thought, this is an amazing story, this relationship he had with his brother. So I wrote the play. Nick helped me shape it into a form that we could actually take to the National Gallery, and then on it went. And we did. We really threw ourselves into the publicity because we really believed in it. And it was the same when I did Long Day's Journey into Night, which was a Eugene O'Neill play that I helped produce in Scotland. Same with Clanland, same with Men in Kilts, and now with this. So yes, it's a bit of a compulsion.
Sure.
It's a strange thing. It's almost something I don't really have control over. That if I was doing this, for instance, if I was promoting a whiskey brand that someone had paid me to endorse or things like that, it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah,
I wouldn't feel that urge, that desire to talk about something that I really, really believed in. But it's different with this because there's been a journey that's brought me to this point, and that's something I want to share, but also to see this as not the beginning of a journey exactly, but this is the early stages of something that I'm really committed to long term.
Absolutely.
So I don't want this to be, for instance, the only whiskey that I bring out. We have plans for the future with bourbons, and it's something that I've just got really into and want to. These I feel like I'm in the foothills, the small foothills of something, and that I think people I've spoken to about bourbon. Bourbon is a mountain that you can never get to the top of. It's just when you think you're at the top.
That is for sure.
Wow, there's a massive peak in front of me. So
I will say, take it from a guy who's reviewed about 500 bourbons on this podcast already. There is no peak. It is very much pushing the rock up the hill and never getting to the top kind of a thing.
It's real Sisyphus time, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So, I hear a pattern emerging here, which is you really truly have the actor's spirit about how you approach everything that you work on. And, I was listening to a great interview with Tom Hanks, and someone had asked him to name his 3 favorite of his own films. And his answer was essentially, I can't tell you the 3 best movies I worked on. I can only tell you the 3 best experiences I had on set. Because as an actor, it is so hard to divorce the actual process of the work from the final product.
Very true.
And I'm just wondering if you can you comment on that a little bit? When you go to a premiere and you just see the film, are you able to watch it in a vacuum, or is it impossible to divorce from the work you put in?
No, it's impossible. In fact, it's one of the reasons that a lot of actors, myself included, don't watch the things that they've been in for that very reason. Because, not that I haven't. Look, for Outlander, for instance, this is a terrible confession that Outlander fans will be shocked by, but I've only seen 2 episodes of Outlander. First, at the premiere that I went to in San Diego, because same with The Hobbit. I've seen the premieres of The Hobbit. I watched The Hobbit with my kids. Same with everything, Preacher, The Witcher, everything. The exception would be Men in Kilts, because I'm an executive producer on that, and it's something we created. So we've seen everything. We have to watch everything. But everything else, it's a combination of crippling embarrassment, because I think people sort of have a misconception about actors, or certainly some actors, that they're just like big show-offs, that they just love, just having people looking at them and all the rest of it. And there's something that may be partly true. I'm not entirely sure, but there's something else going on with acting. But what I can tell you is you don't like watching yourself doing it. Sure. It's because the stage, of course, it's perfect, because on stage, these moments are gone forever. Nobody's recording them. Well,
sure.
It shouldn't be. And when you do stage work, you're just there in that moment. And I think what Tom Hanks is talking about is sort of a bit like that when you're doing it, what you remember about these projects is the experience of doing it, not necessarily the end result. And partly because you have no control over the end result in film and television, really. You are part of something much bigger. And so you take the moment that you have on set, and then you kind of have to forget about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's right. My experiences, certainly, I can think of, obviously, Outlander. The Hobbit was definitely one. The moment, I think, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of moments on the Hobbit trilogy, but the first moment, when there's a helicopter. The first moment when I was the first dwarf to arrive at Bag End, right? And when you stood in front of the set of Bag End, there it was, fully constructed. It was this existing building, and there was the green door, and I was in costume. They came and they did all the final checks. They made sure I looked good and all the rest of it. I knew what I was doing. And I just had to, on action, I just had to knock on the door. And then the door opened. And that was this sort of signifying moment for me of the beginning of something that I had no idea what it was going to be like. So I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
Same with Rambo. When I did Rambo with Stallone, being on set with him, that his sort of really open approach to improvisation, which I was really surprised by. And just when you're doing improvisation, you really have to be super aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And listening to what people are saying. Because bad improvisation is when people don't listen. It's like bad conversation. It's like, I don't care what you're going to say. I'm just going to say what I want anyway. Which is, part of the problem that we have in the world at the moment. People don't listen. But yeah, on Rambo, there were moments like out of body experiences where I became suddenly aware. It was like a third eye was watching me saying, you are talking to Rambo.
Right.
And my brain couldn't quite process it. It was as if I'd stepped inside the screen, like in, The Last Action Hero, when he comes out on the screen.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what? And he's talking to me.
Right.
He's talking back.
You become aware of your own fandom in a sense, right?
Yeah, well, yes. It's you bring with you your history as a film fan. Yeah. A fan, in my case, a fan of Rambo, a fan of Sylvester Stallone. I grew up watching those films. And, it's the same when you meet anybody, certainly in my career, that, when I met Christopher Lee and people like that, you go, wow, it's almost too much to take in. Actually.
Absolutely. Well, you've mentioned a few names here. And going through your filmography, you have enjoyed the opportunity to work with some major sort of A-list Hollywood stars, and also some very major, I guess we could call them A-list directors as well. And I'm wondering, like, from a set perspective, being there on the day, is there a difference between working on a project that is very star-driven versus working on a project where the director is sort of the star of the project?
Interesting. Good question. I've definitely been very lucky that the sort of starry names that I've worked with have all been actually very generous people, generous with their time, not ego driven in perhaps the way you might expect, actually interested in collaboration. And so that has been a real feature for me. There's always exceptions, when you do things and that there might be somebody who's well known and you realize very quickly that, okay, they're going to be a bit tricky. Tricky. And, they can happen on stage as well. But the thing I've learned about those people is they tend not to last. They can be, they can do well up to a point, but then there always comes a point where actually the reality, the truth about them as artists, I suppose, emerges, and real artists, people that are interested in creating things together, whether it's on film or television or with whiskey or with a book or whatever, they're not. I mean, ego is involved because you'd have to have some kind of an ego to even put these things out.
Right,
but
right.
I'm not that modest, but that isn't the primary driver. It's actually the enjoyment of the experience of making it. Like Sylvester Stallone is a very good example. One thing that a lot of these people, the best people that I've worked with, the kind of people that you're talking about, what they all have in common is that they have a genuine childlike enthusiasm for what they're doing. They are children. Peter Jackson, Sylvester Stallone, he's a very scary child, but he's and I'm a child too in that sense. And you have to be in touch with that part of yourself, that children have enormous enthusiasm for things that adults don't really understand. You watch a child get involved in something and you're sort of like, what are they seeing it? I don't get it. But for the child, it's everything. And that's the thing that artists or people involved in this sort of industry or whatever creation that they want to be involved in, that they have that in common.
How much of that willingness to collaborate comes from experience, though? I look at your filmography, and especially like your most recent projects, like to your point, they've all been based on books, but they're all also sort of in the fantasy genre in some ways. And I wonder, like, as a young actor, would you have felt more insecure or maybe felt like you were pigeonholing yourself more than you do now? I think there seems to be, with these established actors and directors, the ego sort of falls away after a while and you become more comfortable, with that collaborative nature and less concerned with, the sort of insecure, how you're perceived as you go along.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think there's a little bit of, the law of mutual attraction going on with that stuff, because something that I've learned about myself and I've accepted is that my love and my real passion when it came to acting wasn't necessarily Shakespeare, although I've done a lot of it over the years in theatre. It was always this little sort of thing on my shoulder that was saying, yeah, but what about film? What about TV? What about action? What about fighting? What about all the things what about swords? Why don't we do a bit more of that?
Sure.
And so I don't think, if people are destined to take certain paths or be open to them anyway, I don't think my path was destined to be a lawyer in a TV show or, a doctor at a hospital or, the psychiatrist or, things that I'm not saying I wouldn't want to do those things, but I love the genre of fantasy. And I have sort of found myself getting more involved in that. I wanted to be a Roman, and I did 2 Roman series back to back. I wanted to be in a kind of Monty Python movie, and I was in Eric the Viking with Terry Jones and John Cleese. So there was that. I wanted to be a cowboy, and I got to do that in Preacher. So there are things that I've always really, really, really wanted to do, and perhaps that level of desire just gives you that edge when you're really going after it, And I've always wanted to be in an action movie like Rambo. So, yeah.
In looking through your TV credits, I think that you have, I don't know if it's unwittingly or with full knowledge, you've been involved in some really groundbreaking television shows. And in particular, you did at least a couple episodes, I think, of the Ali G show when that first came out. And you were also involved in 24, which is a show, especially in America, I think we give a lot of credit to the sort of the Bourne Identity movies for introducing this sort of real grounded, the Paul Greengrass shaky cam kind of thing. I think 24 actually may have even preceded the first Bourne movie. And it's really interesting to me. Are you aware when you're working on these sort of groundbreaking projects, whether it's in comedy or action, do you know that they're brewing something that hasn't been seen before?
Not entirely. I mean, with 24, I was a huge fan of 24. And that's actually been another feature of things that I've been involved in. I was a fan of Lord of the Rings, and I got to be in The Hobbit.
Sure.
I was a fan of 24. I was a fan of Prison Break. I was a fan of the Preacher graphic novels. And so I was a fan of Monty Python. So being invited to be part of those things was just so exciting. I was a fan of Rambo. But 24, I mean, very groundbreaking. I mean, the split screen,
absolutely,
the real time stuff. I mean, I'll never forget the first pilot episode of the first season of 24. And at the end, you watch, and the air hostess and the thing and the guy, blowing up the plane, jumping out, and you're just like,
right.
What?
Yeah.
And it really, I think, marked truly addictive television. You had to keep watching. You had to keep, and I mean, there's always been popular shows, but television has come through many iterations over the years. It's gone away from everybody watching the same show on a Friday night, tens of millions of people tuning in because there's only like 4 channels or whatever.
Right.
To multiple choices, and those shows having to hold on to you. You want to see the season finale of Succession. You want to see what happens after they've cut Sean Bean's head off at the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Right.
Those moments where you go, bloody hell. I wasn't expecting that.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of all of that stuff. And so when I'm in it, when I'm a part of it, I mean, I love, well, I can't talk about that particular one, but there are things that I've done where as I've been doing them, looking forward to what people will think of it.
Sure.
This is going to be, they're going to love this.
All right. Before we get off of movies, we are titling this episode. It's part of our series that we call My Favorite Movie. And so, it is such an obvious question to ask you, but if you had to pinpoint one film that you could never get rid of, if forced to at gunpoint, what would you consider your favorite film?
Okay. It's not perhaps, I'm not sure how many Americans have seen it because it pertains very much to a particular point in British history. And it also marks, I think, one of the last great epic British war films, I suppose you could call it, which is Zulu.
Oh, yeah.
Which I have seen at least 10 times. And it's just a perfect film. And also the story behind the making of it. There's a perfect, I mean, Stanley Baker, who was one of the stars in it, Michael Caine's first movie.
Sure.
Stanley Baker, it was his passion project. So I really identify with that as well, that he moved heaven and earth to get that film made. And I'm trying to do the same with a couple of movies myself that I'm trying to produce and work on. And, the sense of achievement he must have had doing that and the fantastic end result. It's just such an incredible story of mutual heroism, both from the Zulus and from the 24th Regiment of Foot at Rorke's Drift. It's an incredible true story, and it's filmed brilliantly. And the music, everything about it, I just love Zulu.
I think you're absolutely right, though. There's almost a subgenre of sort of late 60s, early 70s epic films, especially in Britain, that I feel like really got passed over by the general public. Or I think about John Huston's The Man Who Would Be King. I think about some of the later David Lean films. It's just really interesting that tastes had changed, I guess. But when you go back and rediscover some of these movies, it's not like they were forgotten because they lacked quality. And in fact, the scale of these, you're absolutely right. They just don't do it like that anymore.
No. And what's interesting about a film like Zulu is that although it opens in the aftermath of Isan Luana, the big massacre of the British troops, you don't see the battle. You see some people walking around, some dead bodies and stuff like that. And you have Richard Burton's voiceover coming in. But if that film was made now, it would have to have a big battle at the beginning.
Yep.
It would have to have real action right from the get-go. There would have to be something to catch the audience. Whereas this begins in this really gentle way, men in a river building a bridge, a bit of comedy, bit of this going on. And the slow build, the inexorable, that something's coming, something not great is coming. And they're going to find out, but you're going to find out with them. And so that the audience are together with the characters. The audience haven't got they haven't got an advantage, or they haven't been previewed with something. They are with them. And that's something that I think film to some degree has lost. That the need to grab people's attention now, the shortness of people's attention span, won't allow them to let films unfold in the way that perhaps something like Zulu did.
Sure. Are there any films or actors in particular now that you've been in the business as long as you have, that you've developed an appreciation for that you may not have had before you got into the business?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a great question.
I was just talking with somebody this week about Matt Damon as an A-list star, and how Damon is such a subtle actor, but he's so uninterested, it seems, in big showy performances, and he anchors he's great in Oppenheimer. He just, he's not trying to upstage anyone in that film. And so I feel like once you know what you're looking for, and you know what to see from everyone who's supporting, whoever the star of the scene is, quote unquote, I just feel like there's so many actors that go unsung because they're not trying to steal the spotlight,
Yeah. No, I agree. I have a great appreciation of somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor, because his range is so great. He really does have, it's not competition, but, I would place him, Tom Hanks is great. But I think his real strength is playing that everyman character that people can identify with, which is a great skill. It's not difficult. It's not easy to do that. But Leo manages to really cover so much, comedy, action. Just he's done all of that sort of stuff. And I think the other person that I would from the past that I would compare that to is someone like Gene Hackman, who I really
absolutely
enjoyed so much as an actor. You never saw a film with Gene Hackman in it where Gene Hackman did a bad job.
Yep.
He's fantastic. And he is exactly that kind of person who is all about making the film great.
Yep.
The story, telling the story. So when you see him in something like Unforgiven, he's great in that film, but he is a supporting character to Clint Eastwood. Movie. And he plays it, to perfection. And those are always the actors that I've wanted to emulate if I can. I've always wanted to just be true to the story and play my role. So, when I did the first season of House of the Dragon, it was a real departure for me in a lot of ways, because although I was carrying a bloody great sword and there were dragons and all the rest of it going on, I was a very, very morally upright, correct individual. I didn't have loads to say, but my role wasn't my role meant that he wouldn't be talking all the time. That's not what he would do.
Sure.
He listens. he absorbs, he takes in, he has his own personal opinions, and those are expressed in the end. You see how he feels about these people in the end, but it's his silence, his lack of expression, that actually speaks volumes about his character. Same with Preacher. When I did Preacher, which was a sort of echo somewhat of Clint Eastwood's characters in some of the Westerns that he's done, and it was actually written by Garth Ennis as a Clint Eastwood sort of character. Again, he barely speaks, but he's all about that brooding, terrifying silence.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, I've learned that along the way, that it's as somebody said, it's not that you don't have anything to say, it's you choose not to say it.
That's the life lesson from today. Always shoot for brooding, terrifying silence. That's my takeaway.
It's carried me through my life. When I go and get a coffee, I don't tell them what I want. I let them guess from my brooding, terrifying silence.
That's it. I bet you get a lot of free coffee out of that as well.
That's right. It works every time.
Yeah.
They just want me out of the store.
Graham, before we let you go today, I do want to talk about the whiskey. Let's dive into this whiskey. As I said, I've tasted it already. It is absolutely delicious. I think the obvious question that Americans in particular are going to ask about this is, why bourbon? Like, why not Scotch? We would have anticipated that from you. What was it about bourbon that made you want to put your stamp on that?
Well, my experience of bourbon began, nearly 20 years ago, actually. With an American friend of mine when I moved to America, an actor called Nolan North, who's a wonderful voice actor, primarily fabulous, wonderful guy. And he introduced me to bourbon. And the thing about it is that, obviously, being Scottish, my father, regularly used to bring Scotch out. We'd toast at the table. He's deeply rooted in you as somebody from Scotland, from the UK. That that's our drink. That's our drink. And when I tried bourbon, the thing that I noticed almost immediately, in fact, was I preferred it. And
yeah.
It actually pains me to say it a little bit, because it does feel a little bit like heresy.
Sure.
And that's not a disrespect towards Scotch, because I do like Scotch. There's loads of whiskies I love, peaty whiskies, not so peaty, Highland Park, loads of different iterations of whiskey that I've really enjoyed. But that first taste that I had with Nolan, and I think a lot of people who know Scotch but don't know bourbon kind of just think it's just a kind of an American substitute for Scotch, without realizing that it's its own unique spirit. And
absolutely.
When I took that first sip, I thought, oh yeah, no, this is different. This is not Scotch. This is something else. And I loved the sweetness to it. I have to be the slight, the syrupy quality to, as it went down your across your palate, and that was beautiful. But also with the Scotland American thing, it's a little bit like my acting career. There was a part of me that felt that, well, I should be doing Shakespeare, I should be doing this, but my love lay elsewhere. My love lay in American movies, TV, action, all of those things, that I was describing earlier. And I consciously made that move as an actor nearly 20 years ago to be honest and go, no, this is who I am. This is what I want to be doing. Yeah. And I went out and I booked Rambo when I arrived, and that set the pattern for the career that I've had since then, really. And this is the same. I knew that I liked bourbon, that I preferred it. I daren't ever mention that. And when I finally got together with Connor and Paul, the people that really started my proper journey with bourbon, I understood that this was something else I wanted to do, that I wanted to devote passion into, and that Scotland, the Scottish connection with America, what really started to spark my imagination was the history, the fact that the Scots and the Irish and the English, let's not forget the English, they came over and they settled in that particular part of the eastern United States, and brought with them a love of distilling spirit, grain.
Yeah,
they wanted to do. They knew how to do it. And the fact that it's tax, really, Washington, with what he did by trying to tax these people, that forced them west, that made them discover these great limestone, iron-free waters and all the rest of it, that was so perfect for making this particular spirit, this wonderful accident that happened. And I love the history of accidents in that sense. And I suppose, once I blended that with my already growing love of bourbon, my own sort of private confession that I actually preferred it, with my love of history, there was only one thing that I could do, and that would be to make my own bourbon brand and not make Scotch.
Absolutely.
I mean, it actually meant that couldn't be something I could do, because it wouldn't be honest.
Well, I cannot speak highly enough of the whiskey itself. I'm looking forward to all the future releases, but if this were to be the only one, I would still say, stamp of approval and gold star, because this is just a phenomenal whiskey that you've chosen.
Thank you so much. That's really lovely. I'm so glad that you feel that. Yeah, it means a lot. It really does, because I hate the term sort of celebrity brands. It actually literally makes me physically wince. But if I can introduce my love of not just bourbon, but my belief in this to a wider audience, then that would be worth it, having that tied to it. But I definitely want to emphasize that I'm not here to be the face of something. I'm here to be in it for the long haul, and this is something that I really believe in, and I want to grow, and I want to learn as well in the process of creating it.
Well, with our last few minutes here in the interview, I've always found that the best way to endear yourself to your guest is to completely blindside them with a segment that they did not prepare for. So in the spirit of that, I'm actually very excited for this. We've done this before with brand ambassadors and master distillers. We took a questionnaire that was popularized in America on the show Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. He asked a very famous questionnaire in the latter half of each episode, and we modified it to call it Inside the Whiskey Studio. This is the first time that I will get to give the questionnaire to a Hollywood actor. I have to warn you, this is going to be, I'm putting you on the spot here, rapid fire. Are you ready for the Film and Whiskey questionnaire?
Okay, right. Yes. Go on.
What is your favorite word?
Subtle.
What is your least favorite word?
Control.
What sound or noise do you love?
Well, this probably the sound of my children's voices.
What sound or noise do you hate?
So many. The sound of people talking on their phone with the
speaker on.
They're in public.
What's a profession other than your own that you would like to attempt?
I don't think I'd necessarily be any good at it, but something with my hands, so something like carpentry.
Who are your favorite fictional heroes?
My favorite fictional heroes? Let me think. Hold on. Probably Rat, Mole, and Badger in The Wind and the Willows.
There you go. Who's your favorite musician?
Led Zeppelin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What is a natural gift or talent that you do not possess that you wish you did?
The ability to play a musical instrument. 100%.
What's your desire there? Drums, bass, guitar?
Probably guitar. Yeah. I mean, I'm a Led Zeppelin fan, you know.
All right, not to get too morbid here, but these are always great answers. If you had a say in how you died, how would you prefer to go out?
I think probably suddenly.
Yeah. I've always preferred the old like Looney Tunes having a piano dropped on me kind of thing.
The angle on the
exactly.
top of the head. Yeah.
All right, and finally, this one requires a bit of context. We've had a lot of people suggest pairing their whiskeys with very expensive meats and charcuterie, and that did not necessarily appeal to our ideal listener. And so we always ask this: if you had to pair McTavish Spirits with a fast food item, what would it be?
It's really difficult. A fast food item.
I mean, you look like a guy that consumes, copious amounts of fast food.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I've dabbled.
Sure.
A fast food item. Now, when you say a fast food item, not a branded item, but just to kind of.
It could be if it's very particular to a brand. That's okay.
Okay. Let me think. I'm trying to remember because I lived in New Orleans for 2 years when I was a preacher. And that unique sandwich that they have down there. What is it?
Oh, a po' boy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I would choose.
Oh man, that sounds amazing right now. I'm sipping the whiskey right now, and a shrimp po' boy sounds pretty incredible.
Yes. A shrimp po' boy. Yes, that's the one. Well done. We got there in the end.
Yeah, we did. Graham, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. Thank you for rolling with the punches. Thank you for completing the questionnaire. And most of all, thank you for this whiskey.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. I'm delighted that you like it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, we will be back on Tuesday with another regularly scheduled episode. But until then, I am Bob Book, and we will see you next time.